Kindly read the poem.
Behold her, single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself. Stop here, or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grain, and singing a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. No nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travellers in some shade haunt among Arabian sands. A voice so thrilling near was here in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest Hebrides. Will no one tells me what she sings? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow for all unhappy far off things and battles long ago, or is it some more humble lay, familiar matter of today? Some natural sorrow, loss or pain that has been and may be again. What ere the theme and maiden sang, as if her song could have no ending. I saw her singing at her walk, and o'er the sickle bending. I listened till I had my fill, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore long after it was heard no more.
So that's a portrait of William Wordsworth. So the solitary reaper, solitary as in the lonely reaper. So there is this girl who is reaping in the field and then she's singing a song. She is all alone by herself. So first we'll try and understand the meaning of this poem and then we'll try to analyze it from the new theory espoused by Wordsworth and Coleridge. So, behold her single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself, stop here, or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grain and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. So now the poet happens to overhear and see a girl standing in the field. She's singing by herself and she's reaping. She's reaping something in the field, right? So she's reaping and singing by herself. So behold her, just see. So the poet is drawing our attention towards this figure, this picture of this single lonely girl standing in the field, very far off, standing there and singing. So he's saying, stop here or gently pass. That is either you can stand here and listen to her or simply go from there. So what is she doing? Alone she's cutting and binding the grain and she's singing a melancholy, as in a sad song. And then he's saying, oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. So vale as in the valley. So the deep valley, profound is deep. The deep valley is overflowing with the sound of the song sung by the girl. No nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travellers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands. A voice so thrilling never was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas amongst the farthest Hebrides. Hebrides is an island off the coast of England. So now he's comparing the song to the song of Nightingale. So the song sung by the girl is so beautiful. That is, this is more beautiful than the songs sung by Nightingale. So no nightingale did ever chaunt, chaunt as in sing, sing more welcome notes. That is welcome song to tired group of people in some shady area among Arabian sands. That is a reference to travelers traveling among the desert sand. They would be very tired and weary and traveling. So when you are traveling like that and suddenly you hear the song of a nightingale, it can be really, really comforting. So her song is now compared to that. So her song is more comforting than the song sung by a nightingale to tired groups of people traveling in the desert. A voice so thrilling never was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird. So, a song is much sweeter than and thrilling than the song of the cuckoo bird in springtime. Cuckoo happens to be, you could say, a symbol of sprightliness and, beauty as well as sweet singing. The voice is so melodious. So, her song is much better than even the cuckoo bird. and a cuckoo bird, and her song is now breaking the silence of the seas amongst the farthest Hebrides. That is, her song, her voice could be heard as far as Hebrides. Hebrides, another island, I told you, island off the coast of Great Britain. So it can be heard even till there. It is so, so beautiful. Will no one tell me what she sings now? The poet is wondering to himself. So won't anyone tell me what is she singing about? Maybe it's some plaintive number, plaintive as in some plain old songs. Numbers flow for old, unhappy, far off things. Maybe she's thinking and singing of something lonely, lost, and far off. Maybe she's speaking about something that happened in the past, something very, very you could say very old, something ancient. Maybe she's thinking about that and singing, and something very unhappy. Her song is kind of melancholious. So maybe unhappy, far off things, and battles long ago. Or is it some more humble as in some, or is it something very ordinary? So is it something about, sad about things that happened long back, or is it something about the ordinary that is happening, familiar matter of today, that is something happening recently? Or is it something to do with natural sorrow, loss, or pain that has been, and maybe again, maybe she's singing something universal about love, maybe about death, maybe things that bring sorrow to human life, human existence. So thing that has been experienced already, and again we would be experiencing. So he's wondering to himself what could be the topic of her song. Whatever the theme, the maiden sang as if a song could have no ending. I saw her singing at her work and over the sickle bending. So now he's saying, whatever the theme, I don't know, I really can't understand. But then what I understand, it is really deep, touching, and beautiful and melodious. So whatever it is, I stood there and I'm listening. And the maiden is singing as if her song could have no ending. That is, she went on singing as if it would never end. And what is she doing? She is singing and she is bending over and using a sickle to cut the grass, or cut the plants, whatever. So she's at work. I listen motionless and still. So now this is the effect of the song on the poet. So he's standing there, he's listening, he's very quiet and listening to what the girl is singing. And as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore long after it was heard no more. So now he stood there, he was standing there transfixed by the whole scene, by the song, and then now he is carrying the song into his heart. So now he is climbing and he is going away from that particular scene. So this moment of transfixation, or this moment of epiphany, that revelation is over, but then he feels blessed. He feels blessed, so he's carrying those strains, those beautiful beautiful lines in his heart, and then he's going. So long after it was heard no more. So this is the effect of beautiful songs on our minds. Yes or no? When we listen to very, very beautiful songs, even when the song is over, the thing continues in our heart long after it is heard no more. That is the effect that beautiful melodies have on our hearts. All right, so that is the poem for you. Now we'll try and analyze and try to see this poem as an example of a romantic poem, or how a romantic poem should be according to this new idea proposed by Wordsworth and Coleridge. So, the new romantic model of writing poem. So, now what we are going to do is we are going to read The Solitary Reaper as a romantic poem. Now, you know what the poem is all about, right? And what has happened to the poet listening to the poem. So, we'll do an analysis of the same. So now the Solitary Reaper, as we know already, is a part of the Lyrical Ballads, which was published in 1798. So this poem can be seen as an example of Wordsworth's theory of poetry. And what is his theory? What does he say about poetry? It is actually, we look at it, we've already seen this in the previous lecture, wherein he says poetry is nothing but that deep, profound emotions recollected in tranquility. That you experience something, you carry it with you, then you sit over, think about it, and write it, and then you relive the same experience. So, this is an example of his theory of poetry. And this is written in that preface to the lyrical ballad. So, there is a preface, something like an introduction in the book, wherein he speaks about his theory of poetry. So now the rural landscape. So here we find a breakaway from the neoclassical tradition. In the neoclassical poetry, in neoclassical work, cityscape was the canvas, wherein people of the city, their manners, their tradition, their customs, those things were considered as matter for poetry. But here now you have a move away from the city onto the rural plains. So the rural landscape, it's not only a backdrop, it's not just an incidental background, but then it becomes a part of the whole poetry or a part of the whole happening. So there is a dynamic interaction between nature and man. That is, nature and man, they come together. So there is a fusion wherein the human being, man, thinks that he has become a part of nature. So it's difficult to separate the two. So there is a fusion of nature and human being. So what happens, or what appears like an alluring scene in the poem, alluring as in interesting, attractive scene in the poem, actually this intervenes in the poet's perspective on the event narrated. So when you look at it, what is the poem about? It's about this girl standing somewhere in the fields all alone, singing and doing her work. She's reaping, she's singing and reaping. But then this particular incident becomes an occasion for the poet to talk about poetry. So this becomes a meta narrative. Meta narrative is, this is actually a poem about poetry. It's not a poem just like that. It's a poem about a poetry. So there is self consciousness. So when you have self consciousness about its own art, you call it a meta narrative. So the poem can be approached like you know, just as the song takes flight, just as the song reaches its crescendo and then there is a fall. So this is like drawing, you could say, um, something triangular. That is, you have motion that is kind of parallel, and then slowly there is a takeoff, a rise, and then a coming down, a kind of a denouement. So you can find three stages of development. So the poem develops through three stages. The first one is wherein you have the introduction to the lonely girl working in the field. The girl is totally absorbed in her work and she's singing a song accompanying her work. So the entire valley is filled with the beautiful song, and the poet happens to see this and overhear the song. So he's enthralled, he's enchanted, and he feels really happy to have seen that particular vision and to have heard that beautiful melodious song. So that's the first stage, wherein there is this seeing, that opening scene wherein he becomes a part of whatever is happening. So he sees that. And then what happens is, in the second stage, the song is compared with the melodious songs of bird, and then there is the spiritual ecstasy experienced by the poet. So the poem transforms him. There is some kind of a transformation happening in his mind. So he kind of changes. So he reaches a level of sublimity where the song surpasses anything that he has ever heard. So, a metamorphosis of the entire scene to a sublime level. So, that is when you're really lost in some kind of an artwork or poetry. What happens? You lose your sense of being. You forget who you are, where you are. Yes or no? When you're listening to something really beautiful, sometimes you just close your eyes and you forget your surroundings and you're taken to a different plane altogether. That's that level of sublimity wherein you are vaporizing, you're becoming something else altogether. That lightness of being, you become sublime. All right. And this is reflective of this theory of primeval purity of mind that was spoken about by Rousseau. Remember that human beings had to reclaim that purity by going back to nature. All that Rousseau had said, going back to nature. So this theory of primeval, that is the initial stages of humanity when people had this purity of mind. So he reaches that state. The poet reaches that state in the state of sublimity. So in order to this happen, for this to happen, that is to reach this level of sublimity, there is one condition. And what is that condition? You have to be close to nature. That is, proximity with nature is a precondition for this transportation, for this change, this the whole change, that is changing into a different level of sublimity. So you have the song, the girl, the valley, the poet, everything merging and fusing into one, which critics call an epiphanic vision. It's kind of an epiphany. Epiphany is revelation, some kind of a vision which is not ordinary. In order to have this vision, you need to move beyond the common, ordinary, and the mundane. So this happens because of the song. So there is a transportation. So on one level, in the first stage, you have the physical reality of the song, the girl, the song, the surrounding, everything. But then after that, what happens? The poet gets immersed into that. So in that immersion, in that process, what happens? He's transported to a different level wherein he forgets everything, and the song is so very beautiful that there is a kind of oneness, a kind of synthesis of everything. Everything merges into one beautiful whole. And what is that? The merging of the girl, the song, the valley, the poet, everything coming together beautifully to create an epiphanic moment wherein you experience a high as in it's not the drug induced. It is induced by the beauty of the art, beauty of that, of those lines sung by the girl. So that is that epiphanic vision, the peak point. And in the third one, what happens? So that epiphany is what? The highest flight of fantasy, wherein you are no longer yourself. You become someone else. You become something else. You project yourself onto something very, very beautiful. And at this moment, the poet is guessing the meaning of the song. So the whole occasion becomes a meta narrative on how to read a poem, according to the critic Terry Eagleton. That is, when you're reading a poetry, this would happen to you, or this should happen to you ideally. That is, you read something, that physical thing, but then because of the beauty of that poetry or of that artwork, you get transported into a different plane altogether. So this is something like spiritual exaltation. That highest point, you can call it nirvana, bliss. That ultimate that you can experience, that ecstasy, that kind of a joy. And after this, what happens? You cannot remain in that joyous state. You cannot levitate. You cannot be there all your life, right? So there is a time limit. So once that is done, what happens? Once you experience that, you enjoy the whole thing, slowly you will come back to reality. The thing is over. So what happens? You descend into the earthly affairs from the heights of spiritual exaltation. So from that state of heightened fantasy, you come back to reality. You come back to reality. So once you come back to reality, there is this anticipation of the weary times. That is, life has to be lived, your daily grind, your classes, or the bills to be paid, or the daily routine to be followed, the things that we may not really like, that weary times is always there. You have to come back because there is just no escape. So that anticipation is there. It is hinted at after this mystical bliss of being at one with the entire creation. That is, you reach that peak point, everything, but you cannot stay there suspended for a long time. You have to come back. You have to come down. Because if you stay there, then what would happen to you? Then you would be, called mad, or you wouldn't belong to this world anymore. You go into a different plane, and that would be madness. So that's not possible. So it comes with an expiry date. So there's a limit to which you can be there, and after that, what would happen? You slowly come down. You come back to reality. You have to face the world, and you have to take on the daily drudgery, the daily life, that is a given to human existence. So now, in conclusion, we can say that poem is structured or divided into three sections, wherein you have the opening in the very mundane, the very rural things that we really don't consider to be otherworldly or exotic or extraordinary. It's something very, very ordinary. The mundane, the daily grind. The girl doing her work is nothing but an ordinary activity that happens every day. But then this particular scene, it is metamorphized, as in it changes. It is transported into a sublime juncture or a sublime level. So this becomes the scene would transport you to a sublime level, that moment of epiphany, wherein you get some kind of a revelation, you experience that ultimate bliss or joy. But it cannot last forever. You have to come back. So finally, what happens? This flight of fantasy, it comes to an end. You have to come back to the mundane. But then when you come back to the mundane, you will be much more richer and blessed because of that experience. You must have learned something from that, which would help to make your life better after coming back. So you become richer emotionally, spiritually, which would make your living a better experience, or you could say a blessed experience. So you have a kind of a harmony. So in this poetry, what is happening? You have a harmony of a far superior kind that is created when you have the girl, the valley, the poet, everything blending into one unique single experience, which is you could say um, for a moment it is crystallized in his memory. So it's like taking a photograph. A photograph is what it is frozen in a moment. It's a moment frozen in history, a frozen moment for your memory. It is saved for posterity so that later you can think about it, ruminate over it. You can go back to it. We create memories and we go back to memories in order to sustain ourselves during difficult times. So something of that kind is happening, wherein there is this crystallization, wherein the whole thing is frozen and it is captured. So, so this is what the poetry is doing. So what happens later? You come back into the reality. So you have this flight of fantasy, everything. You go up, you experience the peak point, and then slowly you come down. But when you come down, you will be a changed person, a transformed person. You'd be much richer for the experience. So you have nature, and so nature as both independent as well as in the form of a benign influence in the drama of human life forms the corner of Wordsworth's aesthetics. So according to him, the beauty of poetry or this kind of an experience is possible only when we are able to be one with nature. And this reverie as in you're lost in that is possible only if you get close to nature. So this is a precondition for you to experience this kind of a bliss or ultimate joy, wherein you forget everything else and you become that particular experience. It's like watching a wonderful movie. When you're watching a movie, what would happen to you? You forget who you are, where you are, and you're sitting in a theater, or that there is air condition, or there is Dolby system. You forget these kind of things and you become immersed in that, and you become an active participant in whatever is happening there, right? That at that emotional level. Same is the case with poetry. And for this rapport with nature is very, very important. So for him, the cornerstone of his aesthetics is this, that is this love, this reverence for nature. So once you have that, then you will be able to experience that bliss or epiphany, that moment of revelation, which would make you a much richer, much deeper and a happy person. So coming back to the mundane, ordinary daily life should not be a problem for you.